Well, the field of 16 is set. It's Selection Sunday. No, not the basketball edition. The hockey edition, the NCAA tournament, is set for the 16 teams that have made the 2019 NCAA men's hockey tournament. Alongside Kyle Levasseur, my name's MJ Baird. We're going to take a look at it from a Quinnipiac perspective, Kyle. Of course, the Bobcats losing in the quarterfinal round of the ECAC tournament, but still a team good enough in the pairwise to make the NCAA tournament. And they slot in as a 7 seed, take it away.
They'll be taking on Arizona State, who will be a 3 seed in the Allentown, Pennsylvania regional. Now look, MJ, it was obviously a disappointing ECAC hockey tournament for the Bobcats as they lose their first first playoff series since joining ECAC hockey. Very disappointing they don't make it to Lake Placid. They can make amends for it in the NCAA tournament. That's the beauty of sports. If you lose your conference and you're still good enough in the regular season, it doesn't matter at the end of it if you end up making it to the national championship game. And we talked about it on Bobcat Breakdown earlier this week. I could see them making it to the national championship game, but I could also see them losing in the first round because this team has been inconsistent all year. It's been a fantastic season for Quinnipiac. They've won 25 games. That's unbelievable. But there's been times, like this past weekend, when they got swept by Brown, where it's not been the Quinnipiac team we've seen when they go and they face UMass. It's been, at times, an unbelievable team, but at times, they've dropped the ball.
Highly volatile, certainly a good way to describe this team. Kyle, before we get to the Quinnipiac-Arizona State matchup, let's have a look at the overall bracket as a whole. The committee electing to go with what a lot of people are considering just the true integrity of the bracket, that meaning 1 through 16, no need to move any first-round games due to conference matchups, no need to move any teams around based on location, a straight 1 through 16 bracket. St. Cloud State, obviously in the top left of your screen, being the number 1 seed. Minnesota State, top right. Minnesota Duluth, bottom right. In Massachusetts, that's UMass Amherst, bottom left. Those, of course, being the 1 seeds. But if we just look at the rest of the bracket, Kyle, does anything here stick out to you?
You know what? The biggest thing, I think we all kind of knew going in, based off last weekend, that Quinnipiac was going to face Arizona State because the other 3 seeds were in ECAC hockey, so they're not going to be facing a team in their conference to start the tournament. That's the way they break it up. So I was pretty confident they would be facing the Sun Devils. What I wasn't sure is where they would be playing. Now, Allentown, Pennsylvania, it's really not too much further than Providence. It's about an hour further, 3 hours compared to about 2 hours in Providence. Quinnipiac got lucky that they don't have to go to Fargo, North Dakota, and that would be a much different trip. Arizona State, they're going to be traveling west and flying like they have been all season long. Quinnipiac, not so much. It's going to be a nice, easy drive. Looking at the actual matchup on the ice, though, I think this is very favorable for Quinnipiac.
Yes.
Arizona State, they've been having an excellent bounce-back season from last year, the first time that they've made the NCAA tournament. But one thing about the Sun Devils, they have struggled when they're not playing in Arizona. A fantastic 12-2 record at home, but when they're not, when they're either away or playing at a neutral site, it's sub 500, 9-10-1. Quinnipiac, on the other hand, only has 2 losses on the road all season long. They are suited for the tournament. They've made it to 2 Frozen Fours. They have the experience over Arizona State. And when you look at other ECAC hockey teams the Sun Devils have played this year, whether it be Harvard, where they split against the Crimson, or getting shut out by Clarkson and getting swept by Cornell, they haven't favored well against ECAC hockey teams. And Quinnipiac tends to do well against teams that haven't seen them that year. I think that Quinnipiac is going to be able to handily win this game if the correct Quinnipiac team shows up.
Another thing, too, Quinnipiac, yes, they'll have 2 weeks off, but Arizona State, even longer time off, playing an independent schedule. It's been how long?
It's been March 2nd was their last game. Now, their head coach, Greg Powers, saying that's a positive for them and that they're recharged. You could also see it as a negative, though, where you're not in mid-season form. It's been some time. They might be a little bit rusty getting out the gate, and I'm sure a little bit nervous. This is a club program just 5 years ago, and now they're in the big dance for the first time ever, facing a team that was just in the national championship a few years ago. Quinnipiac's always done pretty well against Arizona State. I'm sure it's going to be some jitters for the Sun Devils. So I think Quinnipiac wins this one.
Now, if Quinnipiac were to win this game, Kyle, they'd have to face the winner of the other two teams in their bracket, and that is going to be Minnesota Duluth and Bowling Green. What do you see in this matchup?
These are two 25-win teams, just like Quinnipiac, so they've obviously had some fantastic regular season games. We'll start with Minnesota Duluth, as they are the higher seed and the reigning national champions. I mean, there's no slouches, the Bulldogs are. Same as Arizona State, though. They've kind of struggled when they're not on their home ice. They're 12-8-1 when they're not at home. So just above 500, that's not fantastic for a number one seed. They've also lost to Clarkson 3-1 on a neutral site, so that's an ECAC team, if you want to give a little reference, since Quinnipiac has not faced Minnesota Duluth this year. But Minnesota Duluth, what a year it's been for the Bulldogs. They won against St. Cloud State twice this year.
The number one overall seed.
It's exactly. So whenever you do that, just like Quinnipiac beat UMass earlier this year, who's number one in the country, you know it's a talented core. I'm very excited if Minnesota Duluth was to advance to see just how Quinnipiac stacks up against the Bulldogs. It kind of reminds me, the last time Quinnipiac faced a team of this caliber out from the West was that national championship game a few years ago when they faced North Dakota. I don't know if they faced a team like this. Maybe you remember something, MJ. But I don't think they faced a team from Minnesota that can play as well as the Bulldogs do.
Yeah, and the other side of that could be Bowling Green. Could they make this upset? Perhaps. What do they bring to the table?
Well, Bowling Green, they're the 4 seed. You might overlook them as they are, quote unquote, the worst team in the regional, but they won 25 games this year. They also swept Minnesota State, the number 3 team in the country. They beat them twice handily, 4-1 each time this year. They made it to the WCHA championship game. They ended up losing to Minnesota State in overtime, 3-2. This is a team that can compete, and that I think could honestly upset Minnesota Duluth this year.
Getting all these Minnesotas thrown around. We got Minnesota State and Minnesota Duluth. A lot of Minnesota, a lot of West teams all over this bracket, Kyle. All right, Saturday, 7:30, Quinnipiac taking on Arizona State. Number 7 overall, Quinnipiac. Number 10, Arizona State. This again, as you mentioned, the Allentown, Pennsylvania regional. That's the Midwest region. We thought Quinnipiac maybe would get a favorable matchup in Providence. They don't. Ultimately, they get sent to the Midwest region, but like you said, not too far of a drive for the Bobcats. Q30 Sports will be there, but I want your prediction.
I think Quinnipiac gets out early ahead. I think Chase Prisky, it's going to be the first time he's on the ice since he was suspended at Yale. I think he's going to come out with a vengeance and score early, maybe even on the power play as he's done all year long. And once they get a lead, I don't think it's going to be like it was against Brown this past week. And I think Rand Pecknold is making sure that his team does not relinquish a lead late in the game like they did twice this past weekend. I think Quinnipiac gets ahead early. Arizona State is a little bit rattled in their first NCAA game ever, and Quinnipiac goes on to win.
Quinnipiac, no stranger to jumping on teams early in the first period. They've done it quite a few times this season. All right, that's going to do it for the Q30 Sports NCAA Bracketology show. For Kyle Levasseur, I'm MJ Baird. Thanks so much for tuning in. Catch all our content from Allentown this upcoming weekend on our website, Q30TV.com, as well as on social media at Q30 Sports. Have a good night. We'll see you in Allentown, folks.